Welcome back to That Bee Man's bed build. There's a mouthful. Got all the plywood cut up. I've got all the dados cut. I've got all the grooves cut. I've got the plywood stained. And I've actually set up here to run the rabbets through the table saw. So I'm so happy about that. I hate doing grooves and dados with the router. It's a lot of work. It's very inaccurate. Table saw is so accurate. It's beautiful. So let me dive right in and I'll show you this setup I have here. I've run a test piece already and it is bang on. So welcome, stick around. Hope you enjoy the video. Okay, the magic happens right here. This is a Dado Blade. And I apologize if I have any European viewers. You may not have access to this kind of thing. And for the North American viewers, these are outlawed in Europe because the governing bodies assume that they're too dangerous for a European to use. I don't ascribe to that. They're fine with the appropriate procedures and safety precautions. For one thing, you see this throat plate. This is a throat plate that comes out so that I can change the blade. That's red, and that's red for a reason. That's blood. It's not blood, but it's red because if you get your fingers closer than that, then expect to see blood. Okay? So the point is, don't ever get your fingers closer than that to that blade. Okay? And that's why it's red. That's danger. Red is danger. So a Dado Blade is just a blade with certain segments, and it's made so that you can make it wider. And what's happened here is I've sunk this Dado Blade into the side of this fence. I can take this off. I built this box, I'll call it. It's an MDF box. It just sits on my fence on my saw. It's very tight on there. Nothing special, just a box. But I built it very precise so that it would slide over that fence and remain tight. And it remains tight, I'll tell you that. Yeah, I've used it a lot. And I've done this dado thing a lot, so I've run the Dado Blade in there. And it goes right back on that. And it's stuck right there. Can't take it off easily. Alright, so what I've done here is this is my test piece. This is my test piece. And I have to run two sizes of rabbets. This is a rabbet and this is a rabbet. Silly rabbets. One of my rabbets is 11/16 wide. The other one is 3/4 wide. That's because I'm doing this on my end pieces of my cabinets. So this end piece sits up like this. The bottom of the cabinet is 11/16 oak, and the top of the cabinet is 3/4 inch spruce. It is what it is. So that's why I'm doing that. I've in fact already cut the 3/4 inch size, and it is bang on. Hopefully you can see this. So this is my 11/16 oak, and this is my 11/16 rabbet. And I don't know how well you can see that, but that is bang on. Okay. And then the other side of this fits my 3/4 spruce, like that. That one maybe feels just a touch shy, but that's okay. So all these pieces need to be cut. I have 3 pieces of oak and 1 piece of spruce to cut. I've cut the 3/4 inch dado already, and I've even got it marked here, 11/16. dado in this side. Okay, so we're going to bring these over, flip them over. Now this is a little bit difficult because it's a long piece, so I don't have any support in the back here. I have to be careful, but what I need to do is I also need to keep down pressure on the workpiece so that the dado depth is going to be correct and uniform. Okay, so that is what I'm going to do. I'm doing what's called a dry fit, and it's called a dry fit because we don't have any glue yet. We want to make sure the parts fit together properly. We want to make sure we have a process to get the parts together properly, get the parts assembled in the right order, and to be able to clamp the parts well enough for the glue to adhere and do its job. Here I'm using screws, and I'm pre-drilling these screws, partly because I don't want to split my bottom oak plywood, and partly so that the drilled hole then will locate the screw, because I've got it nicely flushed on the end, and then once the screws are drilled, then they will align that panel just right once I have glue. The process is to install the outside panels first. Install, this is the foot of the bed, so I'll install the outside panels first, and then I'll install the center one. And the reason for that method is that when I install this center one, I want to make sure that the top of the center one is aligned with the bottom of my rabbet here, so that it goes straight across, because I've got a piece of lumber, a piece of plywood to go straight across here. So if there's anything out of whack with this dado depth, this groove depth, in relation to the height of that panel, then I can possibly fix my mistake, fix the discrepancy, however you want to look at that. So I'm going to get these screwed on. This one here is a bit different. It's going to be more difficult. I may pin nail it. I don't have trim planned for the footboard, and therefore I don't want to run screws through that. So I need to come up with a different plan. I may be able to simply clamp it. That doesn't locate parts very well, and they tend to slip. So I'll figure that out and decide what I'm going to do. I could pin it and clamp it, just pin it to locate it, and then clamp it to give me the the glue clamping pressure I need. But I'm going to go ahead with that one because I think that's working out really well. I'll run a bead of glue in there and then I'll screw that on. And we'll have our first part, our first 2 pieces assembled. This is exciting stuff. I think it is. I'm using 1.5" screws. Typically the rule of thumb is to use a screw that's twice as thick as your material. That's not a hard and fast rule, but it is what it is. You do what seems to work well for you and you do what makes you feel good. So I'm going to go ahead and drill the rest of these pilot holes. I've got a neat little bit here. This drills a pilot hole for the screw. It doesn't drill at full depth. I don't want it full depth, but I want a little bit of a pilot. Then it drills a little bit bigger hole here for the shank of the screw so that the screw doesn't pull up on the first layer of material. Then it drills a small chamfer recess for the head of the screw. I don't want much of a recess. I don't really need any recess, to be honest. In plywood, a recess is not really necessary. A recess is necessary when you're drilling that into hardwood. And you say, well, it's hardwood. Well, it's not really, it's plywood. Hardwood lumber is what I mean. So I just drill those so that that recess part just touches the surface, and then I back out. And that's that. Now I can take the screws out that I have there, run a bead of glue, and put those back in, and that should be perfect. I tend to make a lot of mistakes in this sort of thing, so I've marked them all with top and bottom. I marked that one with foot. I'm using Titebond original glue. This is not a promotion. It is just simply a mention of a glue that works well for me. This is not Titebond's waterproof glue, which I use for my beekeeping equipment. That's actually really rigid there, which is nice. Very nice to see. And this may be hard to see and get perspective too. I flipped this up on its side. So the piece I'm attaching is on the top. I've got a spreader clamp in the middle there, holding that piece up. And then I have 3 clamps holding it tight to the bottom, and then I'm about to drive some pin nails through here just to you see how it's knotted together here. So that needs to be tight so the glue takes. It's hard to video as I do that, but that's what I'm doing. What they say about clamps, same rule applies to clamps that applies to fishing tackle and bacon. You can have not enough, and you can have enough. You can't have too many. long clamps. You don't use them very often, but when you need a clamp that long, they sure are the deal. These long ones are really expensive. I only have 4. Looks like it'll be enough though. It's really hard to get such a big project and a big person in shot in such a small shop. So what I've got here is this glue has dried for a few hours, and these sides of the cabinet are nicely secured. Next order of business is to put this middle divider in here. And what I want to do is, in order to clamp that, is I want to drive screws through the back here, the bottom. This is the bottom. And in order to know where to drive those screws, I'm going to draw a line on the bottom. It's on the bottom here, I can see a line. Maybe I'll forego the first 6 inches, which is the only part that you could possibly see. And I'll draw that line. I'll actually drill a few pilot holes, and then I'll glue that groove and push that panel into it and drive some screws. Hope that all works. Very big project, and it's very tough to handle sometimes. So in order to do that, I'm going to lay this down again, upside down. So the cabinet is upside down now. I'm going to use this divider as my straight edge, just like I was when I was routing that groove. So I'll just clamp it. I'm going to eyeball the center of that divider. Don't need to get the ruler out for this. And then I'll just draw a bit of a line with my pencil, just to make sure I can follow something when I drive screws. I want glue on the sides, so I'm going to run glue on the sides, and then I'll throw some glue in the bottom. So the real big consideration is to get it flush here. And I've test fit this, so I know it goes in there. And that is flush right there. So now I can drive a screw up from the bottom. See that tighten up. That's nice. I'll do this. There are 3 of these pieces of plywood in each cabinet. These are just structural supports that can be added now, and then I still have openings here to assemble it when I get it in the house and for finishing, spraying the cubbies and whatnot. Incidentally, I keep calling this spruce plywood. This is actually Douglas fir plywood. It's quite nice. You can sure smell it when you cut it. But this grade of plywood is called SPF, spruce pine fir. So it's kind of the same sort of thing. They're very similar in, you know, weight and rigidity characteristics. So regardless, this is a 3/4 inch. I'm going to put the end ones in, and again, this is the foot of the bed. It's not the footboard, but it's the foot end of the cabinet. And I don't want to drive a bunch of screws through here. So that'll be glued, and I'll tack nail that, and then I'll clamp the whole thing overnight. But I'll glue and screw that in, but I'm not going to put the middle one in. The dividers need to go in here before the middle support goes in. So just some glue. It's not rocket surgery at this point. You don't want too much. You don't want glue running all the way down there. You can glue that if you want. I don't think I'm going to glue that one. I'll just screw that down. This one definitely, the glue is going to be the chief attachment method. Those little tack nails are going to do nothing but just keep it from sliding around. That was good, so I'll drill another one. Okay. Squeeze out. A bit squeeze out's a good thing. Shows you that your joint is got lots of glue in it. Because this is going to be chiefly glue strength on this one. So it's got to be nice and clamped really nicely. And I'll just shoot a couple of pins. I can see the glue pop out a little bit when I pull the trigger, so that's good to know. My pins are actually serving a purpose. This is where the dividers come in, and these are not going to fit. They need to be trimmed. Just kind of getting an eyeball. See, they're too high and they're too long. I didn't run a dado in the bottom here for this divider to go into. That just makes for an absolute hellish assembly, and it doesn't really buy me that much. The purpose of these dividers is to add structural rigidity to these dividers here, to side. I mean, those are pretty rigid side to side now, but That's really the purpose of these, and to keep your little cubby, your little bin from sliding all the way through the other side where you can't reach it. Oh, gosh. That's really heavy. Uh-oh. I think I just set it on my glasses. I did, but they survived. I think you might like to see the changeover on this Sawstop table saw. If you don't know Sawstop, Sawstop is an extremely high quality table saw. I'm blessed to own it. And what is unique about Sawstop table saw is that it has a blade brake technology. So what that means is, under normal operating circumstances, if the saw were running and I were to touch that with my hand, the saw blade would stop and disappear. And I would most likely incur little more than a cut on my finger. It may or may not even bleed, it would be so mild. And I know that from people sharing their experience with touching their blade. Some people call the Sawstop the hot dog saw. Because when the salespeople demonstrate the blade brake technology, they run a hot dog on a piece of wood through into the blade, and it fires the cartridge and stops the blade. And then you can inspect the damage to the hot dog, which is very little. You pay a lot for that, but the resulting injuries I've seen people sustain from a table saw are just catastrophic. You can always get the tough guys. Oh, I don't need that, I'm careful. Oh, good. It's good you're careful. Everybody needs to be careful. Some of us just, maybe you just have just a moment of inattention. They say that table saw accidents happen in the first year or after the first 10. You're either a rookie or you're one of those guys who knows it all and is, quote, careful. So that's the Dado Blade. This here, take that out, and that's the blade brake. Okay, so that sits in there like that. The blade runs past it here, and when you touch the blade, there's an extremely strong spring in here that then is allowed to push that aluminum brake. The gap is 1/16 to 3/32, so extremely tight gap there. And that blade runs into that, and it stops. The mandrel pivots and drops below the table surface. And I've had mine trip, and I'll tell you, it's weird. It doesn't really scare you so much as it's just weird, because it just goes bang, and then everything is quiet, and just about that fast. The blade disappears and the saw shuts off and comes to a stop, and it's quiet, and you just think, what was that? That's weird. Well, that was the sound of $200 leaving your pocket is what that was. So the Dado Blade one is wider than the standard one, so that's why I need to change this little bit of debris on it. So you need to change it between standard blade and Dado Blade, plus the fact that Dado Blades are 8 inches, standard blades are 10 inches in diameter. So they're very different. And no, the saw won't run with the cartridge not in place. So there's a little key. I can put my riving knife back in. That's a very, very important safety feature right there. Keeps the wood from binding at the back of the blade. I'll get my nice plywood blade here. And I don't know if you can really see that, but I'll turn it toward you. The teeth on this, it's a double bevel. And it's quite aggressive too. Extremely sharp. So there's one tooth beveled this way, another tooth beveled that way. So when it cuts in a V shape, and it's really good for plywood. It does a really nice job. Cuts extremely well. And I know, you always get the comment that that's nice, but I can't afford that. And I totally get that. I can't afford a lot of stuff either. It just comes down to where your biggest pain points are, and working away at those. Somebody who doesn't do as much woodworking as I do maybe can say, well, you can't justify many thousands of dollars for Sawstop. This is a special situation though, why I got this. I won't go into that, but I'm sure glad I have it. It's a huge blessing. I'm gonna run my blade depth. Not very high. Just above the material, half an inch or so. Okay. Sawstop has a safety switch, so I have to turn the master on and wait for the brake cartridge to initialize. I think what it's doing is it's charging a giant capacitor in there. And it's ready. Turn the safety glasses. I don't think I could have gotten that any more perfect for height. Okay, I need to cut it to length now. Okay, to be certain that my distance between here and here is correct, I've got this piece clamped in here. It wasn't far off, but it was splayed out a little bit. Now I've got this cut. Cut this divider to width and length. And I have a little bit of a difficulty because I'm putting dividers end to end here. I've driven screws in to hold this one in, but I can't drive screws the other way now. I could have offset these dividers so that I could screw them in. That really wouldn't have mattered because my bins that I'm putting in here, I don't think they bottom out anyway. But regardless, I'll glue this, clamp it, and it should be just fine. This end I can screw in. Actually, this end I can't screw in because this is the foot of the bed. This is the part I'm going to see. So I'm just going to pin that. And this one will be held in by glue. that far. That's why you don't like to do rabbets with a rubber. Just never quite right. Alright, that's pulled tight. Well, that brings an end to today's installment of the bed build. I'm extremely pleased how this went. It wasn't without challenges, but it went really well. I'm pleased with progress. My next step is to do this whole thing again with the other cabinet. The only thing left on this cabinet really is putting this center switcher thing in, and then we can move on to the second cabinet. It's slightly smaller, but not smaller enough that it's going to make much difference. And we'll do all of this again. Once that's done, the really fun part starts, and that's making all the trim for the edges. I actually really like that work. It's very precise, and I get to work with oak lumber, which I love working with oak lumber. And so anyway, you'll see what I come up with for trim pieces on this. So I hope you're enjoying the build. I'd like to get on to some other beekeeping related woodworking. But you know, it's fun to build stuff regardless. It's problem solving. It's, you know, how are you going to do this and how are you going to do that? It's interesting that way. So I hope you're enjoying it, and tune in again. Watch the next installment of the bed build. It won't be long. Take care, have fun.